During the 1940s and 50s, two groups dominated the Southern gospel music world. They joined together to create a phenomenon that would carry Southern gospel music from its roots in the Southern U.S. across the country, into Canada, and soon around the world. This is the story of those two groups. Join us as radio remembers the Blackwood Brothers and the Statesmen Quartet.
The Blackwood Brothers Quartet was started in 1934 during the Great Depression with Roy Blackwood, his brothers Doyle Blackwood, and 15-year-old James Blackwood, plus Roy's 13-year-old son, R.W. Blackwood. The brothers began to travel and sing locally. By 1940, they were affiliated with the Stamps Baxter Music Company to sell the Stamps Baxter songbooks, and were appearing on 50,000-watt radio station KMA AM in Shenandoah, Iowa. In 1950, the Blackwood Brothers relocated to Memphis, Tennessee. That move turned out to be the best move they had ever made. They began to appear on television station WMCT, and in 1952 signed a major recording contract with RCA Victor. They were the first ever sign a major recording contract with a major label such as RCA Victor. On June the 14th, 1954, the Blackwood Brothers, by this time consisting of Bill Shaw on tenor, James Blackwood lead, R.W. Blackwood baritone, Bill Lyles bass, and Jackie Marshall on the piano, won the Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts competition on national television with their rendition of Have You Talked to the Man Upstairs? This gave the Blackwood Brothers the national spotlight, far beyond just the southern United States. Now, after winning that contest, in 1954, the Blackwoods began flying to their shows in their own private plane, first Southern gospel group ever to do so. They had so many performances that they used the plane to get around. However, this came to a tragic end on June 30th, 1954, when the group was scheduled to perform with the Statesmen Quartet in Clanton, Alabama during a town festival. Before the start of their show, R.W. Blackwood, Bill Lyles, and Johnny Ogburn, local friend of the Blackwood Brothers, decided to take a quick ride on the plane around dusk. Tenor singer Bill Shaw recalled the event, saying it was about dusk and they were going to take off, and it was unlit, and the plan went out its usual way, but then seemed like they got caught in the upward position and could not pull out, and then just fell to the ground and killed everyone on board. Members of the Statesmen Quartet also witnessed the crash and provided aid to the survivors, taking them back to Memphis that night. After the funeral, that was attended by thousands in Memphis, including a young Elvis Presley, the survivors, James Blackwood, Bill Shaw, and Jackie Marshall, decided to press on. R.W.'s younger brother Cecil Blackwood took over as baritone, and former Sunshine Boys Quartet bass singer J.D. Sumner replaced Bill Lyles at the bass position. In a moment, I'll have a great deal more to tell you about this particular group that included J.D. Sumner as a bass singer. But before we go there, let's stop for a moment and listen to a song of the early Blackwood Brothers. This one includes Bill Lyles, R.W. Blackwood, James Blackwood, Dan Husky, and Jackie Marshall on the piano. From 1951, He Bought My Soul.
Friends, we want to sing for you one of the most popular numbers that we have ever used on our radio programs, and this is one of our most popular recordings. We think one of the most beautiful songs ever written. I think this song will continue to live on and on down through the years to come. We hope you'll all enjoy it as we sing for you now, He Bought My Soul at Calvary.
There's a cross for everyone to bear, but there's a heaven glory soul to share. There's a place in heaven waiting me. I death at Calvary. Each drop of blood bought me a million years. Her soul was born, each time he shed a He bought my soul through death at Calvary. Though days are long and often filled with care, I talk to Him, and with each wondrous prayer, He bids me stay. He bought my soul through death at Calvary. Each drop of blood bought me a million years. Our soul was born each time we shed one tear.
He looked the
He bought my soul
Through death at
The Blackwood Brothers, He Bought My Soul, from 1951. I've already mentioned the plane crash, of course, that killed R.W. Blackwood, Bill Lyles, and Johnny Ogburn. And I also mentioned that the Statesmen were with the Blackwoods at this time. The Blackwood Brothers had formed a partnership in the early 50s with the Statesmen Quartet and created a team throughout the 1950s and on into the 60s for a good decade. They were the dominant act in Southern gospel music. They traveled together, they made the circuits, and they were the top performers. And nobody wanted to follow the Blackwoods and the Statesmen because they were the best of the best. You'll hear more about the Statesmen here coming up shortly. But let me go on with the Blackwoods first, because they were responsible for so many things that we take for granted in Southern gospel music today. J.D. Sumner, of course, joined the group after the death of R.W. Blackwood. J.D. was considered the lowest of the low in the bass singers. He held the Guinness Book of World Records for the lowest voice out there for many years. But he was much more than just an excellent bass singer. He was an idea man. Now, I should tell you that we take for granted nowadays that gospel groups, rock groups, country groups, they're all out there, individuals, they're out there traveling in customized buses. But up until this time, we're talking about in the early 50s, with the exception of the Blackwoods and Statesmen traveling by plane for a short time before the crash, of course, everyone, including the Blackwood Brothers, including the Statesmen, were traveling around in cars. They would load their equipment into one car, all of the singers into another one. Sometimes it was all be in one vehicle, if there was room. But they would travel that way wherever they wanted to go throughout the country. And let's face it, if you've ever been on a long road trip with a bunch of folks, even people that you really care about, you really love, it can get tiresome after a while. Well, J.D. Sumner came up with an idea, and the Blackwoods supported him with it. He said, let's get a bus. We can customize the bus to suit our needs. We'll have room, sleeping quarters. We'll have a place to gather and so forth. We'll have a place for our equipment. It'd just be so much better. Well, as I said, the Blackwoods supported him on this, and they created the customized tour bus. Now, the Blackwoods and the Statesmen were traveling together most of this time period, as I said, and they'd all travel on the same bus. Well, it was an idea that caught on very quickly with everybody else later on, but this was a new idea, and it was one of J.D.'s ideas. J.D. also wrote a number of songs for the Blackwood Brothers, and also the Blackwoods are responsible for a few other things that we take for granted these days. They are at least partially responsible for the National Quartet Convention, and J.D. Sumner managed the first quartet conventions, and in fact, the Blackwoods, of course, were in Memphis at this time. That was their home base, and the first many national quartet conventions were held in Memphis, later to Nashville, and then later on moved again. But this was something new, and the Blackwoods were appearing on television, particularly on Memphis television. They were having regular monthly sings at the Ellis Auditorium in Memphis. The Blackwoods were big. They were about as big as you could get in Southern gospel music. But they did much more. They actually crossed over, if you will, something that's considered ordinary now, but it was new back then. As I told you, the Blackwood Brothers were the first to get a major recording contract with RCA. It was RCA Victor back then, RCA Victor Records. That meant that they had the wherewithal to really have top-notch, very, very best recording equipment, soundtracks, whatever they needed, and they put it to good use. They made some wonderful, wonderful records during that time period. But they also teamed up with Porter Wagner, country singer, to record a country-influenced gospel album called Grand Old Gospel. It won a Grammy for the Best Sacred Performance Musical and was the first of 3 albums, actually, that the Blackwoods recorded with Porter Wagner. 1967's More Grand Old Gospel won a Grammy for Best Gospel Performance, and then in 1969 in Gospel Country, Wagner also performed with the Blackwood Brothers for years, and they were all guests at the Ryman Auditorium many different times. They were big. What else can I say? They were big, as were the Statesmen, which, again, we'll get back to the Statesmen and more of them very, very shortly now. But the Blackwoods were at their very best during this time period. The group also helped form the Gospel Music Association, as well as the National Quartet Convention. Again, all of this with the help of J.D. Sumner. The lineup of Bill Shaw, James Blackwood, Cecil Blackwood, and J.D. Sumner was considered the best of the best, the classic version of the Blackwood Brothers Quartet, with either Jackie Marshall or Wally Varner on the piano. Before we go any further, let's listen to Hide Me, Rock of Ages, and you'll hear J.D. Sumner on the bass on this one.
Journey's ended, leave me in the
Blackwood Brothers and Hide Me, Rock of Ages. As I said, the Blackwood Brothers and the Statesmen began to tour together as a team in the 1950s, and the two of them together, the team, was by far the dominant act on the Southern Gospel circuit, all during the 50s and well into the 60s. The dominance really lasted for about a decade, up until the rise of gospel television shows in the mid to late 1960s, which gave other competitive groups a new outlet for wider exposure. Speaking now of the Statesmen, as good as the Blackwoods were, and believe me, my opinion, for whatever it's worth, the Blackwood Brothers were very, very good. But the Statesmen were the true professionals. When it comes down to just pure sound, pure musical genius, the Statesmen had it. The classic Statesmen of the 1950s. They had the sound, the harmonies that everyone else simply wished they could get. And very few ever accomplished it. A few, but very few. I want to mention first, the Statesmen never would have existed except for Hovey Lister. Hovey Lister, born in 1926, was a gospel musician, Baptist minister, and a politician. He was born in Greenville, South Carolina, learned to play the piano at age of 6. By 14, he was touring with a number of different groups. He attended Stamps Baxter School of Music in Dallas, Texas, but he played for such groups as the Lefevres, the Homeland Harmony, the Rangers Quartet, all through the 1940s. Then, in 1948, he formed the Statesmen Quartet and stayed as that group's leader, musical accompanist, certainly on the piano, but much more than that. Hovey he wrote some of the songs that they did. He arranged the songs. He and Doy Ott, in particular, of the group, were the two real arrangers of the music that was played and sung by Statesmen Quartet. The Statesmen were formed in 1948 in Atlanta, Georgia, as I said, by Hovey Lister, playing the piano. And Hovey had a real flair for showmanship. He handpicked this group of the best singing voices that he could find anywhere, and he put them together, made the arrangements. And Hovey had a flair for showmanship, both at the piano and in the way he did things, that really helped to bring the Statesmen out and helped them cross over into so many different facets of music. Before going any further, let me give you a little example here in the way of an actual song by the Statesmen that not only shows you Hovey Lister's arrangement abilities, for he, of course, did the musical arrangement for the song, and the vocal abilities of the entire group, the Statesmen, but also a bit of Hovey's showmanship. I'll let Hovey introduce Sweeter as the Days Go By.
Somebody has written in wanting me to sing one.
Uh-oh.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't claim to be a singer.
Amen.
Now, getting a few amens from the wrong corner back here. But anyway, I'm going to join in down about the middle section of this down there, the last section, the last quarter something.
You want me to sing my regular part? Or?
I want you to sing your regular part. I'm going to help you. That's what you see. The story is that I'm going to join in and help you.
Use some help.
Yeah, I kind of think you could use a little help. So I'm going to help you out. And at least I did have a request for this. That's what another thing it makes me feel good about. Yeah, Doy requested it. He likes my singing. Here it is, and I hope it'll not blow the tube out at your house. It's called Sweeter as the Days Go By.
The more I trust him, the more I love him, and nothing good for me to deny. The longer I know him, the better life to show him. I couldn't stop now if I tried. Oh, it gets sweeter as the days go by. It gets sweeter as the moments fly. His love is richer, deeper, fuller, sweeter as the days go by. The moment he saved me, his grace he gave me, placed his love down deep in my heart. There's great joy knowing with him I am going, and never from him to depart. Oh, it gets sweeter as the days go by. Sweeter as the days go by. It's sweeter as the moments fly. Sweeter as the moments fly. Richer, deeper, fuller, sweeter as the days go by. Oh, sweeter as the days go by. Sweeter as the days go by. Sweeter as the moment flies. Sweeter as the moment flies. Richer, deeper, fuller, sweeter as the days go by. Hold it, boys, hold it. I can just hear somebody out there saying, I wish they'd sing that chorus one more time.
That's good.
I can just hear it. Can't you hear it, James?
Yes, I can hear it.
You can hear it. All right, then sing your verse one more time now.
Good morning, Savior, His grace He gave me, placed His love down deep in my heart. There's great joy knowing with Him I am going, and never from Him to depart. Oh, it gets sweeter as the days go by. It gets sweeter as the moments fly. His love is richer, deeper, fuller, sweeter as the days go by. Oh, sweeter as the days go by. Sweeter as the days go by. Sweeter as the moment flies. Sweeter as the moment flies. Richer, deeper, fuller, sweeter as the days go by.
Well, if your tube is still in, this is old Hovey saying goodbye and God bless you until next time.
I'm going to read just a very short excerpt from my book, Gospel Trivia, on the Statesmen, and then I'll kind of go from there and we'll listen to some of their music. I'll let you hear what made the Statesmen, in my opinion, the true professionals of the 1950s. Organized in 1948 by Hovey Lister, the Statesmen were pioneers in gospel music throughout the 1950s and 1960s. The group made its first radio broadcast in October 1948 on WCON, Atlanta, Georgia. During the 1950s, the Statesmen had a very successful 15-minute syndicated program. This show not only brought the Statesmen a great deal of attention, it was also the first syndicated gospel music television program to have a national product sponsor, Nabisco. Everyone probably worldwide has heard of Nabisco. Nabisco crackers, cookies, and so forth. Nabisco was the sponsor of these shows. You can still find bits and pieces of some of them on YouTube and to other places, but they're often referred to as the Nabisco shows, the Statesman Nabisco shows. The Statesmen broke the tradition of four men and a piano by using a full orchestra for musical backup on the show. The group also broke into new territory for gospel music by appearing on popular non-gospel television programs such as The Jimmy Dean Show, The Tennessee Ernie Ford Show, and Dave Garroway's Wide, Wide World. The Statesmen's vocals were also used on two major motion pictures, God Is My Partner and A Man Called Peter. Although the Statesmen went through personnel changes, as all groups do, the classic Statesmen of the 1950s included tenor Denver Crumpler, lead Jake Hess, baritone Doy Ott, and bass Big Chief Jim Wetherington, and of course, Hovey Lister on the piano. Let's listen now to another song by the Statesmen. This one sort of features all of the different members of the group, but you'll especially, of course, be able to pick out Big Jim Wetherington on the bass, and toward the end you'll hear the sweet voice of Rosie Roselle. Listen now to Getaway Jordan.
Get away.
Get away. Get away.
Get away.
Get away, Jordan. Get away. Who's gonna get away? Get away, Jordan. I wanna call somebody. Who will get away? Get away, Jordan. Get away. Who's gonna get away? Oh, Chili Jordan, I wanna call somebody. You know I promised the Lord if He set me free. Yeah, oh, I'd go until I find what it might be. Yeah, one day I was walking alone. Yeah, oh, and you know I heard a voice when I saw the one. Oh, now the voice I heard sounded oh so sweet. Yeah, oh, came down from my head to the sole of my feet. Oh, get away, Jordan, get away, get away. Oh, Chili Jordan, I wanna call somebody. Now one of these mornings and it won't be long. Yeah, you're gonna look for me, child, but I'll be gone. Yeah, just a few more rides and settings of a sun. Yeah, and this old battle before then my victory won. Yeah, and now the friends that I used to love so dear. Yeah, done gone on to glory and left me here. Yeah, well, man, yeah, my feet get cold, eyes are shut, body been chilled by the hand of death. Tongue glued to the roof of my mouth, hands lay folded, it calls for bread. Don't have to worry about the way I fare. God Almighty done told me that it be right there. Lift me up on his wings of love, carry my soul to the heavens up above. Tell me, Jordan, deep and wide, but I promise mother I'd see her on the other side to get away. Oh, get away, get away, black old Chili Jordan. Wanna call so late to see my Lord, say get away. Oh, get away, get away, black old Chili Jordan. Wanna call so late to see my Lord.
The Statesmen Quartet definitely changed Southern gospel music. The Statesmen Quartet added flourishes that entertained new audiences, exuberant singing, arm waving, hand clapping, and electrifying performances. This was alien behavior to the traditional convention quartets that had started the Southern gospel music industry. But the new behavior attracted new interest. The Statesmen became so popular that subsequent gospel quartets imitated their style. They also had a tremendous influence on up-and-coming performers that were not Southern gospel artists. People like Jerry Lee Lewis, who copied Hovey Lister's frantic boogie-woogie style piano and his piano bench acrobatics and his hair shaken down in his eyes. That's where Jerry Lee got it from. On July 4th, 1955, the Blackwood Brothers Statesmen team traveled to Texas for an engagement that would feature several secular artists on the same program. Among them was a young Elvis Presley. Elvis was planning to sing his rock hits, but he didn't out of respect for his gospel idols. The Statesmen exerted a powerful influence on the young Elvis, who idolized them and imitated Jake Hess's vocal stylings and Big Chief Jim Wetherington's movements and gyrations on stage. The Statesmen brought Southern gospel music to a much wider audience than it had ever had before. Some would say they were showmen, and they were. The showmanship helped bring attention to the group. But what really sold the group to everyone who ever listened to them was the simple beauty of their harmonies. I say that the Statesmen were the professionals of the 1940s and 50s. Even into the 60s. They were the best of the best. Each individual member was the best of the best. And when you put them all together, you had a group that simply could not be beaten. They were imitated, but never equaled, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many, many others. I want to finish off this episode with one last song by the Statesmen Quartet. And once again, I'll let Hovey Lister introduce the song. Taken from one of their Nabisco shows, here's Hovey Lister and the Statesmen Quartet.
You know, neighbors, we often hear of folks having narrow escapes from death. And apt as not, when we talk about it, we'll remark about how lucky they were, when it isn't luck at all. It's just the hand of God stepping in to perform his daily miracles. We can read in the Bible about the Lord and the miracles he performed. Now, I imagine that's where Arthur Smith got his inspiration for the song that almost overnight became a sensation. It's offered to you now by those wonderful guys, the Statesmen Quartet, and it's recorded also on the Statesmen label. It's called The Fourth Man.
Here is a story from the good book we know, a story about a miracle that happened long ago. We hope that you take courage when temptations you meet. There's somebody watching you who's strong when you're weak.
They wouldn't bend.
They held on to the will of God, so we are told.
They wouldn't bow.
They wouldn't bow their knees to the idol made of gold.
They wouldn't burn.
They were protected by the fourth man in the fire. They wouldn't bend, they wouldn't bow, they wouldn't burn. The prophet Daniel tells about three men who walked with God. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, before the wicked king they stood. And the king commanded them bound and thrown in the fiery furnace that day. And the fire was so hot that the men were slain and forced them on their way.
They wouldn't bend.
They held on to the will of God, so we are told.
They wouldn't bow.
They wouldn't bow their knees to the idol made of gold.
They wouldn't burn.
They were protected by the fourth man in the fire. They wouldn't bend, they wouldn't bow, they wouldn't burn. When the three were cast in and the king rose up to witness their awful fate, he began to tremble at what he saw. In astonished tones he spake, did we not cast three men all bound into the midst of fire? Lo, I see four men unhurt, unbound, and a-walking down there. There's Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and the fiery coals they trod. And the form of the fourth man I see is like the Son of God.
They wouldn't bend.
They held on to the will of God, so we are told.
They wouldn't bow.
They wouldn't bow their knees to the idol made of gold.
They wouldn't burn.
They were protected by the fourth man in the fire. They wouldn't bend, they wouldn't bow, they wouldn't burn.
The Blackwood Brothers and the Statesmen Quartet would continue, but as the 1960s dawned, new groups would emerge to carry Southern gospel music to new heights and even greater acceptance using the medium of television. Next time, we'll explore one of those groups and see how they brought Southern gospel music to a new audience with Jubilee.